At the end of a very long red-carpeted corridor, I noticed this ball of white racing towards me, and I realized it was Princess Diana. She'd rolled her train up into a ball. She had her slippers in one hand, and she was racing down this corridor, lined with windows, and the diamonds of the Spencer family tiara. What a picture of hope and happiness and love. She had it all.
Fairy tales usually end at this point with the simple phrase, "They lived happily ever after."
The Princess of Wales was a new kind of royal. A new word began to appear in the media's vocabulary, die-mania.
The Princess of Wales has agreed to Prince Charles's request for a divorce.
In some small way, I have been of service in return.
Princess of Wales has died in a car accident.
At Buckingham Palace, telegrams of condolence have been arriving from leaders around the world.
Princess Diana was the daughter of an earl. Her father was Lord Spencer, and he was later Viscount Althorp. They had a house on the Sandringham estate, and then when Diana's grandfather died, they moved to the family stately home, Althorp.
She wasn't obviously royalty. She was termed quite unkindly a commoner, although she was constantly rubbing shoulders with royalty because her childhood was based in part up in Sandringham, so she was often on the estate with the royals. Her sister had gone out with Prince Charles, so she knew the family well, and she was essentially circulating in those sort of quite high society circles.
The Spencer family were quite an ancient aristocratic family, and Diana was very proud of her heritage. I mean, they were actually probably grander than the royal family.
Her father doted on her, and she was really fond of her father. I mean, she used to like to dance, and she was very fond of swimming. She was always up and down to the swimming pool. She danced in the main hall and played the piano. No, she never ever said what she wanted to do. The only time I ever heard her say anything was just in fun. At her sister's wedding, she said, "My wedding will be at Westminster Abbey." And she was 18 then, I should think. But we always thought she'd be Prince Andrew.
It's almost impossible to describe to a stranger or someone who's never met Princess Diana what she was really like. What I usually say is she was as beautiful inside as she was out. But to meet her was something special. She lit up a room, she stopped traffic, and when she entered into a room, everything stopped, and all eyes were on her. I've never met another human being who had that aura, who had that charisma, the same as Princess Diana. The princess changed enormously from the time I met her, aged 18, to the very end. I was there from the beginning to the very end. And I can tell you, in the beginning, she was a shy, naive, quiet girl who knew nothing about the world.
When I joined Buckingham Palace way back in 1976, it was already rumoured that Prince of Wales would be marrying somebody like Princess Mary Astrid or Amanda Knatchbull. There were rumours that he would be marrying somebody else. Lady Diana Spencer was never there. There were always suitors around Prince Charles. He was the most eligible bachelor in the world at that time, heir to the throne of England. So he was never short of female companions. I saw him occasionally with the Queen. He'd stay at Buckingham Palace. His suite of rooms were at the palace. He had his own valet, he had his own household, and he was very independent.
I think it gives one a very useful experience of responsibility and discipline. I think responsibility is the most important thing. It's the actual trust that's put in you to deal with other people, and the feeling that they can perhaps put their trust in you as well.
Really, He was searching for someone who could provide him with an heir and a spare. That was his main priority. He was getting old. And the Queen had said to him, "Isn't it about time you settled down, Charles? Isn't it about time you made us grandparents?" So his time was right when Lady Diana Spencer came into his vision.
How well are you coping with all the press attention? Well, as you can see, you can tell. Are you bearing up with it quite well, though? Because it must be quite a strain with all of us after you. Well, it is, naturally. You're coping with it all right, though? You seem to be doing very well. I'm still around.
In the summer of 1980, the Queen told me that a young girl was coming to stay for the weekend. "Will you meet her at the front door and show her a room?" "Of course, Your Majesty." So I'm standing in the front hallway of Balmoral Castle on the black and white tiles, waiting for this car to arrive. And out of the car comes a shy young girl that nobody knew who she was. She had one little suitcase in the back. "Is that all you've brought with you? You're here for the weekend. You have to go to hunting, shooting, you have to go to the Gillies Ball, tea parties, lunch parties, and that's all you have." She says, "Will it do?" I said, "I think we'd better take you to her room and find out." I showed her to her room. "Will you stay for a while and have a chat with me? I'm completely out of my depth," she said. So I stayed. "What time do you go down for tea?" 4 o'clock. You go down to the small drawing room. The Queen will pour you a cup of tea. "I don't like tea." "I'll make sure she has coffee there waiting for you." Then what happens? I said, "When tea's cleared, you go into the drawing room, and then the Queen will pour you a gin and tonic." "I don't drink." "I'll make sure there's a glass of water there for you." Then what happens? Then the Queen plays cards on her card table. "Do you play bridge?" "Yes." "Then make sure you're sat at the card table to play bridge with the Queen." That's a good way to get to know Her Majesty. Then the Queen will take the dogs into the garden. Maybe you could suggest you went for a walk with her. Also a good time to get Her Majesty's ear. That's what you want to do. This young girl was fascinated by this routine of royal households. And as I closed the door that day, I noticed the name on the door, Lady Diana Spencer.
Very generous. A very good friend.
Did you watch TV a lot? Did you have any favourite programmes?
Crossroads.
Did you share that like?
Unfortunately, yes. I wanted to teach children, and they said, "Why not come along?" So I first started off doing afternoons, and then I took over the mornings and did whole days. But I only worked 3 days a week at kindergarten, and the other 2 I looked after an American baby boy, which nobody seems to realise, who was very special to me.
And she's, got pictures of him and always asks about him when she writes.
Oh, she still writes to you?
Yes, which I think is just marvelous of her. I realize how she finds the time to do it is beyond me.
The princess changed enormously from the time I met her, aged 18, to the very end. I was there from the beginning to the very end. And I can tell you, in the beginning, she was a shy, naive, quiet girl who knew nothing about the world. She transformed. She had to. She had to survive. She was thrown in at the deep end and told to swim, and she learned quickly.
Point did you decide that this was the right lady for you? I mean,
well, gradually. I suppose towards the end of the summer and the autumn last year, and I began to realise, what was going on in my mind and hers in particular, and all these things help. But it was a gradual business.
Did you find it a very hard decision, Lady Diana?
I had a long time to think about it, because I knew the pressure was on both of us. And it wasn't a difficult decision in the end. That's what I wanted.
The most watched event in human history was her wedding day. St. Paul's Cathedral was the setting. The princess was brimming with hope and love for the future. She fell in love with her prince. And there they were, a golden couple. He'd also courted her older sister, of course. Sarah had been a suitor, and on Diana's wedding day, her sister, Sarah, turned to her and said, "I thought all this was going to be mine one day, and now it's yours." There was sibling rivalry in the Spencer household. Diana wasn't meant to achieve. The fact that Diana became Princess of Wales, probably future Queen of England, was beyond the Spencer family to comprehend. It wasn't for her to achieve. The brother should have achieved. It was his estate, not Diana's. So there was always some jealousy coming from the Spencers.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend.
How do you like Balmoral as a place?
Lovely.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
Living and working with the Queen was far more easy than living with Diana. With the Queen, we always knew that her life ran with routines and protocols and timetables. We knew that breakfast would be 9 o'clock, lunch would be 1 o'clock, tea would be 5 o'clock, and dinner would be 8:15. It was the same every day. It's Groundhog Day at Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace is a very large house, has over 200 members of staff, and a hierarchy below stairs that you wouldn't believe, with titles that go way back into the 1600s. So you have fendersmiths, you have women of the bedchamber, you have pages of the presence, and you have pages of the backstairs. You have footmen, you have yeomen of the glass pantry and yeomen of the silver pantry. So all these titles, and people know what they're doing. They all have a specific job. I knew what I was doing at Buckingham Palace. From first thing in the morning till last thing at night, it runs like clockwork. It's never been changed. If Queen Victoria went back to Buckingham Palace tomorrow, she wouldn't be surprised by anything. It's exactly the same. Nothing changes at Buckingham Palace. Everything runs smoothly. With Diana, anything could happen. No routine, no timetables, nothing. We might skip lunch, we might be shopping, we could be doing anything during the day. So life was more exciting with Diana. But the difference between the two worlds was I always knew where I was with the Queen. I always knew where the line was in the sand. I knew when not to cross that line, and I knew to stay and bow. I was a servant, but also a friend and confidant to the Queen, but in a different way. With Diana, it was have a cup of tea with me, have a cup of coffee. Don't just stand there. I used to stand every morning waiting for the princess to come through from her dressing room. And every morning, standing there with a half a grapefruit and a cup of black coffee, I'd bow and say, "Good morning, Your Royal Highness." "For goodness sake," she'd say, "when are you going to stop doing that? It's just me and you in the room. Sit down, have a cup of coffee with me and tell me what's been going on." That was her world.
Sorry, I didn't see you there.
I wish you
Sorry.
that.
Hello. You're hugging the lamb.
I'm happy with that. I'm having it all
Lovely
side.
to see you. Lovely to see you. So are you on your way shopping? No.
So the former princess on the world stage did everything as she should, to perfection. But behind closed doors, she was naughty. She was a naughty little girl. She loved to have fun. She loved to giggle. She loved to play practical jokes.
At that time, everybody was saying, "Good luck," and "I hope everything goes well," and "How lucky you are to be engaged to such a lovely lady." And my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her. And we had many messages. It's amazing what ladies do when your back's turned.
What happened with the princess was she came to us at a romantic, new, fresh time into the royal family. She came to save it in a way because it was on the decline. her involvement in the royal family boosted the royal family's popularity, lifted the royal family. There was nothing like Diana. There was Diana mania everywhere. Everybody wanted to see Princess Diana.
People were it was just like a phenomenon. I mean, people would scream when they saw Diana. It was almost like Beatlemania.
I think there was an acceptance from Diana that she was going to be one of the world's most photographed women, and she actually grew in that role and became more confident with the press. I think equally she found it both suppressing but kind of a revelation to her in that she had this ability to perhaps manipulate the media, have a bit of a laugh and joke with photographers and reporters alike, and equally use this global presence for good.
The princess's popularity gave the royal family a new lease of life. She arrived in style. And I think without her, the royal family may have foundered. They may well not be here today. She was that mainstay that kept them going.
Now you're about to marry the Prince of Wales, and one day you would, in all likelihood, be Queen. It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run-up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles, I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
Now, the royal marriage was falling apart, and I was Diana's man, placed strategically at Highgrove, placed there to keep the house in order, but also to be there for Diana, to be there as a rock, she later called me. It was difficult for me to tread the path between Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Now, Diana arrived every weekend on Friday afternoon and left every Sunday. But someone else occupied that space in between. And I learned to serve 2 royal mistresses.
I saw the relationship with Prince Charles develop. Remember, she was a shy, naive young girl and didn't know why she was really involved with the royal family. She soon found out. She was there, quite honestly, to provide Prince Charles with an heir and a spare. And if you watch that early footage of that interview in which someone asks Prince Charles, "Are you in love, sir?" and he says, "Ooh, whatever love is," look at the princess's face, because she looks at him in somewhat sort of surprise, meaning, "Don't you know if you're in love with me? I'm in love with you. Aren't you in love with me?" Well, actually, he wasn't. The princess made a fatal mistake. She fell in love with her prince. In the very beginning, she totally adored him.
I remember the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer very well because I was at Buckingham Palace. I was working for the Queen, and the Queen said to me, "You can watch it on my telly. So take the corgis for a walk in the garden and then watch the telly and you'll know when we're coming back." I was responsible for the top table, which was the bride's table, the bride and groom, and of course the Queen and Prince Philip, and the bridesmaids. So I was waiting for the bride to come back. She'd appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. And then, at the end of a very long red carpeted corridor, I noticed this ball of white racing towards me. And I realized it was Princess Diana. She'd rolled her train up into a ball, tucked it under her arm. She had her slippers in one hand, and she was racing down this corridor, lined with windows. And the diamonds of the Spencer family tiara were glinting in the sunshine. And she was racing towards me. Just me and her in one corridor. She was like a galleon in full sail. What a picture of hope and happiness and love. She had it all. And that day, I waited the wedding breakfast in the ball supper room, served the Queen and the bride refused everything. She didn't eat a morsel. And she said to me later, "I couldn't eat a thing, Paul. My stomach was in knots." I was just totally wound up by the day, by the excitement, by the spectacle. She says, "But you know, the most wonderful thing was walking down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral with my father." She says, "But did you ever look at the footage of that?" I said, "I've seen it many times." She says, "Next time you look at it, watch me." She says, "Can't you see me looking from side to side? Can you see me doing that? Do you know what I'm doing? I'm looking for her. I'm looking for Camilla." And she was there.
Diana didn't have the happiest of childhoods. Her parents separated when she was younger, so she came from a broken home, and I think perhaps there was an insecurity that a seed was sown from a young age, and that insecurity was something that flourished actually within her as she got older.
Is there any possibility of any announcement of your marriage in the near future? Can you tell me? Can you tell me if there's any possibility?
I'm not going to say anything, afraid.
Right, well, Prince Charles did give us a hint himself. He said we wouldn't have to wait too long.
Just as Charles fell immediately in love with Princess Diana, or Lady Diana Spencer as she was at the time, so too did Britain. We hadn't seen the likes of a future princess like this for many, many years, and Diana was just a stunner. I mean, that picture that Arthur Edwards took of her coming out of her nursery in that see-through dress, that set of pins that she sported, the innocence about her, you just thought, wow, this girl is knockout. There was a huge interest from the moment the engagement happened. Everyone watched the engagement footage. Everyone around the world, pretty much, tuned into the royal wedding. I mean, that was a huge event in '81.
Well, I think now when we reflect on it and after we've seen interviews that Diana gave subsequently, we know that she was extremely ill-prepared for married life into the royal family, and she felt enormous pressure from day one. Even when they were discussing the engagement and the wedding plans, I think the pressure started to build on her. The media scrutiny of Lady Di, as she was then, I think, played foremost on her mind. She didn't know how she needed to behave. And when she actually entered married life, she found it a very lonely experience. Charles was off enjoying his country pursuits, and she felt that she was left rather in a world she didn't recognise, a modern woman in quite an old school environment of Buckingham Palace, essentially feeling like a spare part.
Fuck it!
Well, the cracks in their relationship, I think they began to show very quickly. because Diana didn't understand. I mean, after she became engaged to Prince Charles, he never seemed to be around. He was always so busy. And she was moved into Buckingham Palace, and she had her own apartment there, and he was sort of down the corridor. And she was absolutely on her own.
Well, Diana made it very clear that she felt like a fish out of water. Even before her actual wedding, she said she spent those nights before her wedding at Clarence House, which was then the Queen Mother's residence. And the night before her wedding was one of the most miserable of her life. She recalls how she felt completely isolated, you know, the images of the princess trapped in the tower. I think she felt isolated, and I don't think that the palace were prepared for someone who perhaps didn't have that royal training to marry into the royal family and to become a future queen. She was the Princess of Wales. She became famous overnight, and she didn't really have the tools to equip her for such immediate stardom.
I saw correspondence between them. I saw correspondence from the princess to the queen, which said how happy she was and how she loved to be a wife and how much she would support Charles in his future career. They were her views, but times changed. Within 1 year, she had William, and then Harry came along. And so the first 5 years of the princess's marriage, she felt that she could make it work.
Diana particularly was a modern parent, but she was a modern aristocratic parent, and she did use nannies. They lived in Kensington Palace in London, and they also had a country house, Highgrove, in Gloucestershire. And in both of those houses, there was a floor, the top floor of the house was given over to the nursery. And it had bedrooms and sitting rooms and dining rooms, and it was where the royal children spent most of their time with their nannies and with the chauffeurs and close protection officers. So it was a traditional sort of childhood, but with lots of love from both parents. Diana was very demonstrative as a mother. I think she had never been properly mothered herself because her own mother had left home when she was 6 years old. So she didn't really know what being a mother was, and I think she probably was much more like a big sister to her boys than a mother.
Diana was a wonderful mother. She was a very hands-on mother. She absolutely adored her children. I think, in retrospect, it's very easy to see Diana as absolutely perfect. And I think she has been airbrushed to be absolutely perfect. But at the time, I think a lot of people felt that she rather smothered her boys rather than mothered her boys, which she didn't. But it could look like that. She also used them as a weapon against Prince Charles. I think she was criticised a little bit. And they said that how come that the children know what's going on in her life? You know, perhaps she should be a bit more discreet. But anyhow, when I was speaking to Wendy Berry, who was the housekeeper at Highgrove, she said that the boys were very well protected. And they really didn't know what was going on, the fights and things between their parents. They didn't know because there was always someone to whisk them away. You know, a protection officer or a nanny. It's not like being in a little council house, you know, when they can hear the shouting through the walls. They were always whisked away. So I think that William and Harry didn't suffer quite as much as we said that they did because they weren't aware of it. I think in adulthood they're very aware of it, but at the time they were quite protected.
princess's popularity gave the royal family a new lease of life.
And, you know, Diana really broke the mould.
She enjoyed life, you know, she was a vibrant person, she was charming, she was the daughter of an earl, she'd been married, well, she was just 20 years old when she got married, and her life had been very prescribed for her within the royal family. But nevertheless, she still asserted herself, and after she got used to being a princess, she became more and more her own person. And that's what people loved about her.
I think there was an acceptance from Diana that she was going to be one of the world's most photographed women, and she actually grew in that role and became more confident with the press. I think she found her role as the world's most photographed woman both suppressing but kind of a revelation to her, in that she had this ability to perhaps manipulate the media, have a bit of a laugh and joke with photographers and reporters alike, and equally use this global presence for good, and that's how she got into her charitable work.
That the quest for perfection our society demands can leave the individual gasping for breath at every turn. This pressure inevitably extends into the way we look. Eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, show how an individual can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves. And they have, at their core, a far deeper problem than mere vanity.
She realised that she had a role to fulfil and that people would listen to her and indeed follow her every move, because actually there became this Diana mania quite soon after the marriage, which I think as well Prince Charles resented.
Now, if you watch that piece of footage when Prince Charles is asked, "Are you in love, sir?"
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
And she looks at him as if to say, "What are you talking about? Don't you know what love is?" That was the problem from the beginning. Charles didn't really know what love was. He never really wanted a lover. He wanted a mother.
I haven't yet worked out a method of splitting my wife in half. She can do both sides.
In the early days, Diana's light was small, but he began to shine brighter and brighter and brighter. And it was a sort of a Star is Born situation. Prince Charles would say to her, "Well, I married you, I made you a princess. You weren't born royal. This is a man who's been born to be king. This is a man who has been treated from the very beginning as a god, suddenly being eclipsed by this woman." He wasn't very happy.
I mean, I think that Charles wasn't very good at hiding his feelings. He didn't like the idea that they walked down the street, say when they were doing a royal engagement, and the crowd were calling Diana, Diana. So he felt surplus and didn't really know what to do with himself. There was a dinner and he gave a speech and he was saying, "I wish I could cut my wife in half so that she could, so I would have two wives. Once she could shake hands to people on both sides of the road." But I mean, underlying that little quip, you know, he knew that people didn't really want to see him, they wanted to see her, and he didn't like it.
Well, I think Princess Diana, like the rest of the world, was caught up in the fairy tale that was her own royal relationship, and she was willing it to work, as was everyone else. I think very quickly the reality set in that she didn't have much in common with Prince Charles, and actually they were very different people with very different interests. And that's when the cracks started appearing, and people have suggested, and we now know that that was very soon after they returned from their honeymoon, so very early on in the marriage. You had this period of several years where they were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Apparently, post-1986, they were leading rather separate lives, not just staying in different rooms, but on different floors of the palace. I think if Princess Diana and Prince Charles had been ordinary people, they'd have probably got divorced a lot sooner than they eventually did.
Prince Charles wasn't always kind to the princess. In fact, sometimes he was quite cruel. I remember one occasion she came downstairs wearing a beautiful black and white Catherine Walker gown. And she said, "Charles, I've had it made specially. Do you like it? You look like you belong to the mafia," he said, which cut her down to her knees. Then on one occasion she came down in a tartan dress and said, "Do you like this one? Where you look like a British Caledonian stewardess." It was always undermining, just before an engagement began, so that she would lose her confidence. So it was mental cruelty in a way. I never saw any physical violence. I saw tables being upset, I saw crockery being thrown across the room, but I never saw any physical violence. The rest of the royal family and the royal household, they treated Diana as if she was just another gal. In fact, they didn't give her much consideration at all. I did notice that one day, going through the drawing room, the old Queen Mother, she passed the magazine table and Diana's face was on the front of Hello Magazine. And as she walked past the table, she flipped the magazine over onto its backside and carried on walking. That to me said, she's not really accepted. They don't like it. She's beginning to outshine even the senior members of the royal family. This is dangerous territory. Now the royal marriage was falling apart, and I was Diana's man. Placed strategically at Highgrove, placed there to keep the house in order, but also to be there for Diana, to be there as a rock, she later called me. It was difficult for me to tread the path between Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Now Diana arrived every weekend with the boys on Friday afternoon and left every Sunday, but someone else occupied that space in between. And I learned to serve two royal mistresses. One, Princess of Wales, and the other, Mrs. Parker Bowles.
She always knew that there was someone else in the background waiting. She knew it on her wedding day. And again, if you look at the footage of Princess Diana walking down the aisle with her father, you will see her looking from side to side. And she once said to me, "You know what I'm doing, don't you? I'm looking for her." And she was there. Even on my wedding day, she was sat there in the congregation. You see, Camilla Parker Bowles has been that ghost, always there throughout the princess's life.
it was impossible to do this balancing act between the prince and the princess, the prince during the week and the princess at the weekend, and then have someone else pop in to this ménage à trois. It was incredibly difficult because the princess would ring me up from London and say, "Where's Prince Charles tonight, Paul? Where's the Prince of Wales?" "He's out for dinner, Your Royal Highness." "Where is he?" "I've no idea." "Of course you know where he is. You always know where he is." "Who's he got for dinner tomorrow night? I hear he's got a dinner party. Who's coming?" "Don't ask me. Please ask him." One day I told the princess the prince was out. The prince found out. I'd been talking to the princess, thinking I'd been gossiping to her. He rang his bell. I went into the library, stood there. "Your Royal Highness, I hear you've had a conversation with my wife. Why are you talking about me being out last night?" "I'm sorry, Your Royal Highness, but you were." "Well, can't you lie?" "You're asking me to lie about you not being in residence." "Yes, why did you do it? You're bloody told." And he picked up a book and started to stamp on the spot like a petulant child, and he hurled this book at me across the room. I dodged and missed it, and I thought, I think my time's up. I think it's time I got out. Diana rescued me. She took me back with her.
The situation reached a boiling point in 1989 when Diana confronted Camilla at a birthday party. In an intensely emotional exchange, Diana told Camilla that she knew what was going on between her and Charles.
I think Diana was terrified. She says she was. And she looked for Charles. She was looking. They went to Annabel Goldsmith's house, beautiful house in Richmond, and it was a big party on probably on 3 or 4 floors, and she looked around, "Where's Charles? Where's Charles?" And then she realised that he must be downstairs on the lower level in the sort of basement area. Not a basement like we know, but a very glamorous downstairs rooms. And she went down there, and there they were. She obviously got this real anger, because you'd have to be very angry to do that, and brave. And she just confronted Camilla and said, I'm not stupid, I know what's going on. So Camilla must have been completely taken aback. I mean, you don't expect that to happen.
That was the turning point, really, of the relationship, because, soon thereafter, I think Diana had then given up any hope of a reconciliation. Because I think, to be honest, I think she firmly believed that something, like a return to normality within her marriage could happen. I think she really held out hope that might happen. But I think this meeting, I think, probably scotched it. I think she realised then that there's little or no chance of us returning to a normal married life. And thereafter, of course,
The announcement by John Major was made at the House of Parliaments, and their separation was official.
Well, I think Princess Diana, like the rest of the world, was caught up in the fairy tale that was her own royal relationship, and she was willing it to work, as was everyone else. Actually, the reality behind Palace Gates is that pretty quickly it started falling apart. I think very quickly the reality set in that she didn't have much in common with Prince Charles, and actually they were very different people with very different interests, and that's when the cracks started appearing, and people have suggested, and we now know, that that was very soon after they returned from their honeymoon, so very early on in the marriage.
So he's basically a very kind and thoughtful and very sensitive person, and he just didn't understand somebody like Diana. She was much too young for him. Well, I used to say that Diana was a high school dropout and Charles was a university lecturer. I mean, Diana They were so different, and obviously that can work very well, but she was very, very young, and she'd had no experience of life. And although she'd lived on the Sandringham estate and knew the royal family, she didn't really know the royal family. And unless she didn't really know what it would be like to be married into them.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend.
How do you like Balmoral as a place?
Lovely.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
I think she thought it was all going to be sort of wonderful. So she'd been disappointed from the very beginning. And she had this vision of Charles, which wasn't really him at all. I mean, and then she started to find Charles very dull. And he found her stupid. I mean, she had a very quick wit, but she wasn't well read. She wasn't really educated, and Charles was highly educated.
My years at Westheath were certainly very happy ones indeed. I made many friends who I often see, and in spite of what Miss Rudge and my other teachers may have thought at the time, I did actually learn something. So you would never have known by my O-level results.
All his friends were much, much older. So he started to dump his friends. And Diana's friends were all much, much younger. And so they started to lead separate lives very, very early on. And then Diana had children very, very quickly. I mean, William was born in 82, and she'd only got married in 81, and she had a very difficult pregnancy with William. So she was, she was getting used to being royal. She was pregnant. The marriage wasn't quite what she imagined it, but she thought it would all be all right. So she was living on a dream, really.
The rest of the royal family and the royal household, they treated Diana as if she was just another gal. In fact, they didn't give her much consideration at all. I did notice that one day, going through the drawing room, the old Queen Mother, she passed the magazine table and Diana's face was on the front of Hello Magazine or something. And as she walked past the table, she flipped the magazine over onto its backside and carried on walking. That to me said, she's not really accepted. They don't like it. She's beginning to outshine even the senior members of the royal family. This is dangerous territory.
The Queen and Diana weren't pally-pally, because Diana, she was too young. She didn't want to sit. She said, I don't want to have dinner with Brenda. She used to call her Brenda. In those days, there was a satirical story that used to run in Private Eye every week. And the Queen was Brenda, and I think Prince Philip was Stavros. But see, Diana was very quick-witted, but she didn't want to have dinner with the Queen on her own, because she said, I wouldn't know what to say to her. Well, I think Prince Philip, when he heard she was coming, he'd go into another room. So he just didn't want the confrontation with her. But at the beginning, yes, he had a very good relationship with her, and he looked after her. And he made sure that she sat next to him at dinner, and he brought her into the conversation. He could see how nervous she was of the whole situation. And I think the Queen really let him deal with it.
She's painting a very tragic picture of how she was pitched into the royal family without any form of help, without any form of rehearsal, and how they were not able to help her evolve and grow up, and weren't able to appreciate what she was trying to do or give her lessons which she very much needed.
I think after Harry was born, the relationship seriously broke down. It was, it just hadn't worked out like both of them expected. And even before the wedding, Diana had serious doubts, and so did Charles. But it was too late, and her sisters famously said, "But Dutch," which was her nickname, "your face is on the tea towels." And it's a great line. I know it's been used a lot, but it does sum it all up. It's too late. And Charles's friends, his close friends, warned him, "This is not going to work, Charles. She's too young, she's too naive, and you're an imaginary prince. She doesn't know you at all." So it had very little chance. And then if you add that mix to the huge and unprecedented interest in the couple, well, especially in Diana, you can see it reach boiling point.
The public admired the couple deeply. She was cherished as the people's princess, and he held the title of the Prince of Wales. With 2 newborn children beloved by the nation and all the wealth they could desire, they seemed to have it all. However, beneath the surface, both were profoundly unhappy in their marriage.
I think by and large, the national press were very good to Diana in their reporting.
How well are you coping with all the press attention? Well, as you can see, you can tell. Are you bearing up with it quite well, though? Because it must be quite a strain with all of us after you. Well, it is, naturally. And you're coping with it all right, though? You seem to be doing very well. I'm still around.
Well, Charles was so used to having all the attention on him, which it had been since he was born. He didn't like the idea that they walked down a street, say when they were doing a royal engagement, and the crowd were calling, "Diana, Diana." So he felt surplus and didn't really know what to do with himself, and made lots of sort of rather pathetic remarks like, "There should be 2 of me, and if I cut myself in half." I mean, he didn't know what to do or say, and yes, it was a form of jealousy. Yes, it was.
When love eluded them within their own marriage, both Charles and Diana sought affection outside of their household. They each became involved in extramarital relationships. Charles later revealed to his official biographer, Jonathan Dimbleby, that he rekindled his romance with Camilla Parker Bowles in 1986.
Well, Charles was in love with Camilla from a very early age. When he was still in the Navy, he fell in love with Camilla.
She always knew that there was someone else in the background, waiting. She knew it on her wedding day. And again, if you look at the footage of Princess Diana walking down the aisle with her father, you will see her looking from side to side. And she once said to me, "You know what I'm doing, don't you? I'm looking for her." And she was there. Even on my wedding day, she was sat there in the congregation. You see, Camilla Parker Bowles has been that ghost, always there throughout the princess's life.
Meanwhile, it's believed that Diana began her affair with Army Captain James Hewitt around a similar period. Hewitt gained public attention in 1986 when he crossed paths with Princess Diana at a party. Shortly after, he took on the role of her riding instructor, and their relationship soon turned romantic. A connection that would endure for several years.
It was difficult for me to tread the path between Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Now, Diana arrived every weekend with the boys on Friday afternoon and left every Sunday. But someone else occupied that space in between. And I learned to serve 2 royal mistresses. One, Princess of Wales, and the other, Mrs. Parker Bowles. This was still a secret. I was keeping this secret from both the prince and the princess. Until, of course, it became intolerable.
Well, Camilla lived near Charles at Highgrove, and Charles used to see her on Sundays. So when Diana drove back to London, to Kensington Palace, Charles would be out at the other end of the drive, driving off to Camilla's house, or she would be coming to Highgrove. And Diana knew perfectly well this was happening. So that they sort of had Sundays are for Camilla.
By the time Diana met Hewitt, her marriage to Prince Charles was already strained, and reportedly Charles was too preoccupied with rekindling his relationship with his former girlfriend, Camilla, to be concerned.
I think Diana was terrified. She says she was. And she looked for Charles. She was looking. They went to Annabel Goldsmith's house, beautiful house in Richmond, and it was a big party on probably on 3 or 4 floors, and she looked around, where's Charles, where's Charles? And then she realised that he must be downstairs on the lower level in the sort of basement area. And she went down there, and there they were. And then, you know, she obviously got this real anger, because you'd have to be very angry to do that, and brave. And she just confronted Camilla and said, you know, I'm not stupid, I know what's going on. So Camilla must have been completely taken aback. I mean, you don't expect that to happen. Diana was shaking with fear and rage. And on the way back in the car, she was just in hysterical tears. And her protection officer, Ken Worf, was with her, and so he confirms all this, that she just sobbed all the way home, and I don't think Charles said a word.
In December 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced to the House of Commons that the Prince and Princess of Wales were separating.
The Waleses were a very unhappy couple, in contrast to the hopes expressed when they became engaged. Charles said at that time he was surprised she was willing to put up with him. So, were they in love?
Of course. Whatever in love means.
Joining me now in the studio is Andrew Morton, the author of Diana, Her True Story, which brought to the public's attention the state of the royal marriage. Mr. Morton, the palace said today that no third party is involved. Can that be right?
Ostensibly no, but given the fact that the Princess of Wales believes that Prince Charles's friendship with another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles, has cast a long shadow over that marriage, must be considered when you look at the failure of this 11-year union.
Diana, Her True Story, claimed to tell from the inside the tale of a loveless marriage, with evidence from some of her closest friends.
Well, the Andrew Morton book was a sensation. No one had any idea that Diana was involved with the book at all. And in fact, she even denied that she was at the beginning. But what happened was she made a decision that she wanted the world, if you like, to know the truth of her marriage. In the summer of '92, a recording of Diana speaking to one of her friends, who actually was her lover, James Gilby, appeared in one of the newspapers. The transcript of this recording was unbelievable. And he called her Squidgy, and she told him all her woes about, and what she thought about members of the royal family, and you know, the Queen Mother, how cold the Queen Mother was, and it was an extraordinary, explosive moment, and really there was very little that the Queen could do after that.
In 1992, tapes of a phone recording between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles were released, prompting further rumours of unfaithfulness.
With thousands of copies of the magazine now being faxed around Britain, some editors are uneasy.
Those in the know in London and the chattering classes and those with fax machines to Australia can know what's in it, but the rest of the country doesn't.
Buckingham Palace tonight declined to comment on the contents of the magazine. There's been no comment from Mrs. Parker Bowles. In the past, her husband has dismissed such allegations as rubbish.
He will have to soldier on, knowing that more revelations about his private life, his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, may well come out in the future.
You think that's a possibility, that there'll be more revelations about third parties, despite what the palace says?
The fact that the Camilla Gate tapes, the so-called Camilla Gate tapes, have not yet been published remains a sword of Damocles hanging over Prince Charles's head and could fatally damage his position.
In an interview in 1994, Prince Charles admitted to committing adultery during his and Diana's marriage.
Mrs. Parker Bowles is a great friend of mine. I have a large number of friends I'm terribly lucky to have. When marriages break down, awful and miserable as that is, that so often you know that it is your friends who are the most important.
The Prince of Wales had just been on TV to admit adultery with Camilla Parker Bowles, and the princess that evening was due to go out to the Serpentine Gallery to see her old friend Lord Palumbo.
The woman at the centre of these latest royal revelations, Camilla Parker Bowles, was today at home with her family in Wiltshire. It's claimed in a second extract from the Jonathan Dimbleby biography, which is published in today's Sunday Times, that she and the Prince of Wales have had 3 separate affairs.
The Prince of Wales had just been on TV to admit adultery with Camilla Parker Bowles, and the princess that evening was due to go out to the Serpentine Gallery to see her old friend Lord Palumbo and open his new exhibition. I can't go. I'm not going. I'm not going. It'll be too humiliating. The whole world now knows that Charles has been having an affair. He's admitted it. You are going, I said. I've got nothing to wear. Yes, you have got something to wear. I went up to her wardrobe room and picked out a Christina Strombolian dress with a fishtail. This is what you're going to wear, I said. I can't fit into it. Yes, you can. Put it on. So she slipped it on. Now, to complement that, I think we should have the pearl choker and the sapphire. That's all you need. High heels and those jewels. Right, she put them on and she looked $1 million. Remember, when you go out there, I said, you stride, you hold your head high, you smile, you engage, firm handshake. Say to yourself, I am Diana, Princess of Wales, and I am here to stay. I am the mother of the future King of England. Say it to yourself. The only secret Diana ever kept from me was the Martin Bashir interview for Panorama. Now, I'd known Martin Bashir for a long time, and he was one of the men that I used to bring into the palace under a blanket because he didn't want to be seen by anyone. He was never a lover of the princesses. He was just a work associate. He persuaded the princess that she had to have a voice. She needed to tell her story, and what better a vehicle than Panorama? I was sent home on a Sunday afternoon. Strange, I thought. Why would she be sending me home? Go and spend some time with your family. I'm doing nothing this afternoon. Don't worry about me. The minute I'd left the palace, in through the back door comes Martin Bashir and his camera crew. And they set up the Prince of Wales sitting room, which she used for that interview.
At the age of 19, you always think you're prepared for everything, and you think you have the knowledge of what's coming ahead. But although I was daunted at the prospect at the time, I felt I had the support of my husband-to-be.
I had no idea that was being done. The next morning I came to work, I noticed all the furniture had been moved. Why have you moved the furniture? It's not in the same place. I had a dance class. I had to move the furniture out of the way just so that we could exercise. Strange. Very strange. She avoided me for the next 2 days, never spoke to me. How strange, I thought. She's hiding something. And then she told me that she'd made a recording with Martin Bashir for Panorama. What have you said? Well, I just put the record straight, she said. We didn't know what she'd said until we saw it.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
31 million people stopped in their tracks on that Monday night and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Princess of Wales bearing her heart on national television. We couldn't take our eyes away from it. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. There are 3 people in my marriage. My husband isn't fit for the top job. I think it would bring him limitations. She was honest, open, and frank. Did you love James Hewitt?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Were you unfaithful?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down.
It was all there. I couldn't believe it. It was too raw for most people, and an embarrassment for the royal family. That was the final straw. That was the straw that broke the back of the House of Windsor. From that moment on, Diana was outcast. Her titles were stripped. She was no longer prayed for in church. She was on her own.
You do live very much on your own, don't you?
Yes, I am. I don't mind that, actually. You know, people think that at the end of the day, a man is the only answer. Actually, a fulfilling job is better for me.